because as Christian witnesses of Jah, we need to be able to talk to each other appropriately, historically and culturally, understand the Bible. And with this recent increase in attention to the Black Hebrew Israelites, a lot of popular sports figures and entertainment figures like Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and many others, right? So it can be confusing for you in ways that if you don't at least understand to some extent, you won't be able to talk about it. And you need to also be able to talk to other Christians, Christian witnesses of Jah, especially if you are considered Black. And so you understand your potential historical relationship with the people of the Bible. Peoples, right? Really, but we're talking about the Israelites in terms of like the chosen people. This whole issue of the Hebrew Israelites, often the Black Hebrew Israelites, often gets caught up into this racial element of, I want to say supremacy, right? Of certain being special, right? They're the chosen ones. A lot of the Black Hebrew Israelites who push this, and it, even though in the Bible the Hebrews are the chosen people of God, right? They're chosen by God and His special property. We're all sinners, and in the New Testament, that's not the deciding factor of whether or not we're approved or chosen by God, right? We're Jews of the heart. It's a circumcision of the heart. It's not based on an outward appearance. God is not partial, in every nation that fears Him and works righteousness, God is acceptable to Him. So it in terms of the New Testament, right? Now you may have some Black Hebrew Israelites that contest certain parts of the New Testament because of this issue or others. So either way, right, we accept what the Bible teaches in terms of the agreed upon books that are historically most the best, basically, right? The most accepted because of their quality and relationship and textual history, the relationship with each other, figures of the past and their textual history. So we can get off onto that, but if we stay on the subject of what the Bible teaches, I think you can explain all of that. So let me just explain a couple of things I brought up, though. So I kind of moved around on a few levels just to help explain why we're going to go in this direction for a moment. It's come up recently in discussions in the media and people's consciousness. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it'll become more discussed, right? Even Everett had brought it up to me. And now the Black Hebrew Israelites have a lot of publicity. And again, notable figures like Kanye, Kyrie, and others believe this very strongly. And so how do we deal with that, right? It's kind of a sensitive issue because I think it would be wise not to deny Black Hebrew Israelites' claim that they have a, how shall we say, a cultural, ethnic relationship to the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. We don't need to deny that. And I don't think we should completely because, well, let me show you. Let's go to the Song of Solomon. We'll talk about this for a few moments because it's important for us to be able to talk to people as this becomes more discussed, to understand the Bible, and to talk to our children and other people about things. All right, so let's go to the Song of Solomon. I'll bring you guys up here. We'll do this together. Right. So if we go to verse 5, I think it's important that we even acknowledge to Black Hebrew Israelites that probably they do have some cultural, ethnic association with the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible because there's no reason to believe that the people called the Hebrews didn't intermingle with other ethnicities, including what we'll refer to as more as Black or accepted African dark-skinned ethnicities, right? Because in Africa you have some regions that are populated with lighter-skinned ethnicities, and then you have darker-skinned ethnicities. And usually it would be in areas where, where it's more deserty. It seems like historically and culturally that's more the country and area where darker skinned people lived. Not entirely, but even as you'll see here in the Song of Solomon. So there's really nothing out of place with believing the Israelites had darker skinned people among them, or that even right? We know that, as I mentioned before to Everett, the historical reference to the land of the black, the Egyptians, I believe is a reference to the dark soil of the Nile. I'm not aware of an actual reference to Egyptians as black, as being referred to as in terms of that color. But I would not deny that the Egyptians uh, intermingled with darker or black skinned people in Africa. In fact, I know they did, right? We have the Nubians and others, and we have depictions of black Egyptians and light skinned Egyptians historically. So there's not, again, as I mentioned earlier, this monolithic one culture of color of people, even among Egyptians or Israelites, because so let's move into the discussion of the Israelites, right? We know at times they were kept pure, but even from the Exodus, right, they had many Egyptians and others that went with them, or people from Egypt that went with them. And then we also know that at some point we had the diaspora, the dispersion of the Israelites. We had numerous occasions where the Israelites obviously were taken captive and were part of other national groups, right? And so we know that that's what also develops different ethnicities among broader cultural lines of peoples, right? So even blacks today, right, could find people in their history that are probably considered white, because that's just how races intermingle in ways. So to deny that there's an actual racial ethnicity or part of it as being black in terms of the nation, the Hebrews, would probably not be accurate at all. Now, to what extent it would be consistent with the black Hebrew Israelites? Well, again, so you have these different historical um, racial interminglings. You have, even with the Jews, the diaspora, right, where they were dispersed among the Greek peoples, the Hellenistic period, so much so that we have the Bible translated in an Indo-European language, and even considered scripture Greek, right? So we have very clear and long periods where the Hebrews intermingled with Indo-Europeans and also with Africans or darker skinned Africans. I don't see any of this as improbable, and I see it as all very defensible historically, just based on what I said, that I could go into more detail to define if I had to. But getting back to the issue of the black Hebrew Israelites and how we should try to approach them and what our understanding is biblically, right? So what I just said, I think, is important to keep in mind. But I think we can actually engage the black Hebrew Israelites and say, look, I think it's probable, it's likely to me that the Hebrews had involvement with what we'll call black ethnicities in Africa, so that their ethnicity is not a monolithic, non-black culture. Look at the Song of Solomon, right? So in the New International Version, it says, "Dark am I, yet lovely, daughters of Jerusalem. Dark like the tents of Kedar," right? And some translations say black. King James Bible, "I am black, but comely." Comely means beautiful. "O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar," right? And she's considered like the most beautiful woman of all of them, right? So we clearly have, now this is someone who was in, I would cite this to the black Hebrew Israelites and say, this is your best, I think, in the Bible, this is the best evidence to show that there is a darker skinned ethnicity element to the cultural and ethnic line of what we call Hebrews. Because obviously, it goes on in verse 6, "Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I'm darkened by the sun." My mother's sons were angry with me, made me take care of the vineyards, my own vineyard I had to neglect. So it seems like someone, right, the darkness or blackness, in Hebrew, it's the word shachor, kind of like Tupac Shakur, but it's shachor. And then in Greek, it's melas. So it pretty clearly does mean black or dark, right? Black. And it's associated with being darkened or blackened by the sun. So to me, that seems pretty clear that this is someone who was brought to Solomon, brought to Israel from one of the darker ethnicities and regions where the sun is more prevalent in ways that is associated historically with darker skinned people. That's that's pretty much what I believe is responsible for the melanin and development of darker skinned people, and the levels of melanin that are attributable to the pigmentation of their skin as it relates to where they developed, darker skinned people developed or lived, which was mostly in a very sunny region, which is opposed to the lighter skinned Europeans, the more northern, non sunny areas by comparison to Africa. It's responsible for their lighter skin development. Again, there's no real monolithic color here. And even the colors themselves, I don't think are correct. I'm not white. If you look at white, like white, what you see around the words in the text on the screen, that's white, right? This is white. I'm not white. I'm beige. And most people are not the color black or brownie, right? Well, there might be some that fit in one way, but it's not a monolithic, it doesn't apply to everybody who would be considered those colors, like I just showed with myself. And I think that use of colors is really the best evidence of systemic racism we have. We have been culturally taught to believe or refer to ourselves and others by color, no matter what the ethnicity, no matter whether you're related at all historically. If you look a certain way, you're considered white. If you look a certain way, you're considered black. I don't see how that's not racism. You're basically ignoring everyone's ethnicity and instead grouping them together as if they're the same by color. How is that not racism? It doesn't help anyone. It ignores everyone's actual history and culture and is used as a tool to divide people who probably have nothing to do historically with the issues that are used as a means of division, right? So, not often with the Black Hebrew Israelites, they're very sensitive, right? Because obviously the issues in this country is historically with slavery, even though I believe the United States and Great Britain, two countries that were involved in the West Atlantic slave trade, brought an end to it much earlier than people want to give us credit for, whereas all these other nations were continuing to do it. So while the United States participated, most states, or the same number, banned slavery domestically and internationally, even from the time of the Constitution and thereafter. And then once slavery was banned as an international trade practice in 1808, that's when it was official. I was actually done a year or two earlier. Then thereafter, of course, we had the additional states being added to the Union, this constant, increase in division over slavery, and the continued illegal slave trade, right, with the southern states and even people in Britain. But as in terms of the governments, they had brought an end to it. And then they gradually continued to bring an end to it, not just in their own countries, but all throughout the world. Why isn't the United States and Great Britain given credit for that? Now, all these other countries did the same things. Even the West African peoples were the ones who were selling their peoples, although other countries like Britain and others were also taking slaves. But then you also had the pirates, the black pirates of North Africa and West Africa, who enslaved numerous quote unquote white peoples. So you could look at this in so many ways, right? Not to mention the fact that 10% of the West African slaves came to the United States versus 90% going elsewhere. No one talks about that. We just have a lot of inaccurate information that it makes people emotional. And so you have to be careful how you talk to, especially groups like Black Hebrew Israelites. They can get very sensitive over racial issues. But I think engaging them and saying, you know what, I believe it's pretty clear there is involvement with Black people and the Hebrews, even Solomon right here, right? And so I don't know for sure. Probably Solomon had, right? If this was the most beautiful woman and she's Black, probably she wasn't the only one Solomon had around. And Solomon had many wives and women, concubines approved by Jah, as the nation developed and the line of the Messiah was brought forth. So it's not unreasonable to me at all that actual Black, quote unquote, dark-skinned African ethnicities were intermingled with whoever the Hebrews that were freed from Egypt were originally. So I think that's an effective way to do it. I would also say that probably this very same account, right, that associates the Black woman with Solomon and the blackness of the woman with being blackened by the sun, right, showing she's probably clearly from a different area. I'm not saying it's not sunny in Jerusalem, is it, right? But that's not, there's clearly a difference being spoken of here, is there not? Where her color is directly associated with an area that's affected by the sun that doesn't seem to be similar to the people in Jerusalem, right? Which are referred to right here in verse 5. Dark am I, yet lovely daughters of Jerusalem. Dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. There seems to be a difference here between this Black woman and the women of Jerusalem, right? She stands out. She's different from them. She's been blackened by the sun. And she's the most beautiful woman of all, according to Solomon. So it's something that's not only likely, in my opinion, but that doesn't present an issue at all. I think it's very clear also that other ethnicities also intermingled and interbreeded, became a part of the ethnicity that we refer to now as Jewish or Hebrew, right? Very clear involvement with the Hellenistic world. So now, but the Black Hebrew Israelites want to go back to the original time, and of course being freed by Moses, and everyone was Black, right? So they get very firm about this, everyone being Black at this time. They go overboard, and it doesn't really fit the information we have that shows that yes, there were no doubt Black ethnicities as part of the development of the Israelites, but that's not how they're referred to in the ways that would suggest that that's how they were completely all the way back. Doesn't seem that that was also the case with the Egyptians either, although there were times when there were Black ethnicities that ruled Egypt. So, but that also again to me shows, right, the Nubian kings, that the Egyptians that weren't Nubian probably weren't as Black as the Nubians, and they're not depicted as Black either in paintings that we have from various periods of Egyptian history. So I wanted to go over this. I hope it was kind of helpful to you in understanding a lot of the recent publicity and stuff that we've gotten from certain Black Hebrew Israelites. And also, right, if you are a black ethnicity or you know black ethnic people, right, we have to use these terms now because they've been culturally embedded in our thinking. Black, white. I don't like them, and I don't think they're correct. But there's almost no way that they're at least not considered pejorative completely, so we can use them without becoming a problem. But we do want to try to have an understanding of things so that we can discuss these things calmly, right, with people who want to talk. And if you find yourself talking with black Hebrew Israelites or others who are very passionate about their ethnicity and color, then in terms of the Bible, I think this information can be helpful to you. Song of Solomon, the different historical associations between black and non-black people, right? Ethnicities, but I'm going to black, different black ethnicities and non-black ethnicities, and even Indo-European ethnicities over time. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter to us, though, right? We're Christians. We're not. We recognize every color or ethnicity is in God's image. No one on the earth is not in God's image if you're a human being. And color is not something the Bible ever says we are supposed to use or someone's outward appearance or ethnicity. Right? We're talking about Christianity and the Bible as a whole. We're not the Hebrew nation being guided through the wilderness to try to establish itself so the Messiah can be born. We're past all that. The two people have become one, the Gentiles and the Jews. One flock, one shepherd. There's neither Jew nor Greek, neither male nor female. They didn't even use black or white there, right? Or even light or dark, right? That's not how they referred to each other. They referred to their actual ethnicity back then, most often. Although we do have references here, don't we? Where the color of the person's skin is described for us in a way that we can kind of show this historical cultural interplay in a way that allows us to, I think, effectively engage black Hebrew Israelites, not deny what they're claiming to us, but not fully embrace it either, but embrace it to the extent that the Bible and history show us. Who cares, right? I mean, whatever people they are, whatever people we are, we should be trying to please our Father and get along with each other. All this other stuff is vanity, right? And usually a cause for division.